My ex-boyfriend spent weeks convincing the internet I was abusive. Then his best friend sent me the messages that destroyed his entire story. My name is Claire Bennett, and I'm 32 years old. If someone had told me 2 months before everything happened that Ryan, my ex-boyfriend, would try to turn me into the villain of a breakup story he invented online, I would have laughed. Ryan could be sensitive, insecure, even dramatic when he felt rejected, but I never imagined he would go that far. We had been together a little over 2 years. The breakup itself wasn't explosive. There was no cheating, no screaming match, no dramatic scene with broken dishes or slammed doors. We simply reached that quiet, uncomfortable place where two people realize they are trying to force a future that no longer fits. At least that was what I believed at the time. Ryan and I had always lived separately, which turned out to be one of the few lucky decisions I made in that relationship. When I finally sat him down and told him I thought we should end things, he looked hurt, but not shocked. We talked for almost an hour. He asked if there was anything he could do to change my mind, and I told him gently that I didn't think so. When he left my apartment, the ending felt painful but adult. I thought we had handled it with respect. A week later, my cousin sent me a screenshot with one message. "Claire, what is this?" I opened the image and immediately felt that strange, cold confusion you get when your brain needs a second to accept what your eyes are seeing. Ryan had posted a long confession-style statement about leaving a toxic relationship. He never used my name, but he didn't need to. Anyone who knew us knew exactly who he meant. He wrote about being manipulated, controlled, emotionally worn down, and gaslit. He implied I had isolated him from people, watched his phone, and made him feel afraid to be himself. The wording was vague enough that strangers could fill in the blanks with their own experiences, but specific enough to damage me with anyone who knew we had just broken up. I sat at my kitchen table reading it 3 times. Outside my window, people were walking dogs and traffic was moving like it was any other evening. Meanwhile, Ryan had just handed the internet a version of me I didn't recognize. My sister called within the hour. "Please tell me you've seen it," she said. "I have." "What the hell is he doing?" "I don't know." "Are you going to respond?" That question followed me all day. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to expose him. I wanted to write a full explanation and force every person liking that post to see the truth. But every time I started typing, something stopped me. It wasn't calm wisdom. It was fear, anger, disbelief, and a little voice in the back of my head telling me not to give him exactly what he wanted. So I said nothing. Ryan didn't stop. Over the next couple of weeks, he posted quotes about narcissists, stories about red flags he ignored, and little reflections about surviving emotional damage. One post claimed I had monitored his messages, which was almost laughable because during our relationship, Ryan used to hand me his phone constantly to show me memes, texts, photos, everything. My best friend Jessica nearly lost her mind over it. We were at lunch when she pushed her phone across the table and said, "You need to do something." "I know." "No, Claire, I don't think you do. He's making you look dangerous." I looked at the screen. Under Ryan's latest post, strangers were calling him brave. A woman I had never met wrote that women like me were the reason men stayed silent. I wanted to throw the phone across the restaurant. Instead, I gave it back to Jessica and said, "People who know me know me." She stared at me like I had personally offended her. That is not a legal strategy or a social strategy. That is something people say right before they get destroyed online. She wasn't wrong. I won't pretend I handled those weeks perfectly. There were nights I drafted paragraphs and deleted them. There were mornings I checked his page before brushing my teeth and hated myself for caring. I told people I was fine because I didn't know what else to say, but I wasn't fine. I was watching someone I once loved carefully rewrite 2 years of my life. Then Emily messaged me. Emily had been Ryan's best friend since college. They were close enough that I had always treated her like a permanent part of his life, even though she and I were never especially close. Her message came through on a Tuesday night while I was answering work emails on my couch. "Call me. You need proof." I stared at it for a few seconds before calling. She answered immediately, but she sounded exhausted, like she had been rehearsing the conversation and still wasn't ready for it. "Claire," she said, "what Ryan is doing isn't right." I sat up. "What do you mean?" "The posts, the whole toxic ex thing. He's lying." I didn't answer right away. I think part of me needed to hear her say it again. "He brags about it," she continued. "About the engagement. The likes. The followers. He told me your breakup was the best thing that ever happened to his social media." My hand tightened around the phone. "He said people love victim stories," Emily said. "And he said making you look bad was easy content." That sentence hit harder than all the public posts combined. The post had hurt, but this was different. This meant he knew exactly what he was doing. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I was around you two for 2 years," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "You weren't perfect. He wasn't perfect, but what he's saying didn't happen. I told him he was going too far, and he called me a traitor." A moment later, my phone started vibrating with incoming images, messages, screenshots, conversations between Ryan and Emily. The first one opened with Ryan bragging that the engagement on his breakup posts was insane. Under it, he had attached a screenshot of one of his own posts and written that he didn't expect it to blow up so fast. Emily had asked if he felt bad. Ryan replied, "Why would I? She dumped me." I kept scrolling. He joked about follower growth, sympathy messages, and how strangers always picked a side when relationship trauma was involved. Then I reached the message Emily had warned me about. Making Claire look bad was honestly easier than I thought. I read it more than once, not because I misunderstood it, but because I wanted there to be some hidden context that made it less ugly. There wasn't. By the time I finished, almost an hour had passed. I called Emily back and asked what made her finally send them. "I kept thinking he'd stop," she said. "At first I thought he was just hurt and venting. Then, every time people supported him, he got more excited. Eventually it stopped sounding like heartbreak and started sounding like a business plan." That was exactly what I had been feeling but couldn't prove. After we hung up, I backed everything up. Every screenshot, every post, every message. I created folders on my laptop, saved copies in multiple places, and sat there until nearly 2 in the morning trying to decide whether posting them would make me look just as messy as him. The next day, Ryan posted again about surviving emotional manipulation. That did it. For nearly a month, I had taken the high road, or at least tried to. I had ignored gossip, comments, bait messages, and people asking if his accusations were true. But there is a point where silence stops being dignity and starts helping the lie. That evening, I uploaded the screenshots. No caption, no speech, no explanation. Just his own words. Then I put my phone face down on the counter, made dinner, watched half a movie, and went to sleep. By the next morning, my phone looked like it had malfunctioned. I had over 200 notifications. Jessica had texted me twice, first telling me to call her, then immediately telling me not to call until I had read the comments. People were sharing the screenshots, reposting them, and lining them up beside Ryan's public posts. For the first time since the breakup, the conversation wasn't built on vague accusations. It was built on something people could actually see. Ryan started deleting posts before lunch. One disappeared, then another. By the time I checked again, every major post about his toxic relationship had been removed from his profile. That told me more than any apology could have. If he believed what he had written, he would have defended it. Instead, he tried to erase it. Jessica called during her lunch break. "He's panicking." "How do you know?" "Because people keep sending me screenshots of him deleting everything." A few hours later, Ryan posted that he was taking a break from social media for his mental health. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explanation. He wrote like someone being attacked by negativity, as if the problem was cruelty from strangers, rather than his own messages becoming public. That break lasted about 4 hours. My sister called me laughing so hard she could barely speak. "He's saying the screenshots are fake." "What?" "He says you hacked him." I almost admired the desperation. Almost. Ryan claimed the messages had been fabricated to destroy his reputation. That might have created confusion if Emily had stayed quiet. She didn't. Within minutes, she commented from her real account. "They're real. I sent them to Claire myself." Ryan deleted the comment. Emily posted it again. He deleted it again. By then, people were screenshotting the deleted comments too, and the harder he tried to clean up the mess, the more obvious he made it. Emily eventually posted her own statement. She explained that she had warned Ryan to stop, that she had watched him talk about likes and follower growth, and that she wasn't defending me because we were close. We weren't. She was speaking because she was tired of watching someone she cared about lie. That distinction mattered. People understood it. That evening, Ryan's mother called me. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She just said, "Claire, you need to take those screenshots down." I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, still holding the dish towel I had been using. For a second, I actually thought she might be calling to apologize. That hope disappeared fast. "Why?" I asked. "Because you're ruining his life." "Did Ryan tell you what was in those screenshots?" "He was hurt." "That's not what I asked. Did you read them?" She didn't answer directly, which answered enough. She started talking about Ryan's stress, his depression, how fragile he was, how people were being cruel to him online. I listened longer than I probably should have. Then I asked, did he worry about my mental health when he spent weeks telling people I abused him? The call went quiet. Eventually, she said, he made mistakes. Yes. Then why are you still doing this? That was the part none of them seemed to understand. I had posted once. I wasn't making videos. I wasn't giving interviews. I wasn't contacting people in his life. Ryan had built the fire, poured gasoline on it, then blamed me for standing there with a flashlight. I'm not doing anything, I said. Everything happening now is because of what he chose to say. She didn't like that answer, but she didn't have a better one. Ryan still could have stopped there. If he had logged off for a few weeks, most people would have moved on. Instead, he treated losing control of the story like a personal challenge. First came the burner accounts. New profiles with no real photos started watching my stories and commenting under relationship posts about women who pretend to be innocent after damaging men. The details were just close enough for people to know who he meant. Jessica sent me one and wrote, "Tell me this isn't him." It was obvious. Same phrases, same dramatic moral language, same habit of turning every disagreement into a lesson. People noticed fast, and the burner account became another joke at his expense. Then came the payment requests. One afternoon, I received a request from Ryan for $300. The note said, "Compensation for emotional damages." I stared at it, laughed once because I honestly thought it was a joke, and declined it. Another request came later. Therapy costs. Then another. Then another. 5 in total, each with a more ridiculous note than the last. I showed Jessica, and she nearly dropped her coffee. "What is he expecting?" she asked. "I have no idea." I saved those too. At that point, I was no longer surprised by his behavior. I was documenting it the way you document a leak in the ceiling because you know eventually someone will ask when the damage started. Then Ryan involved his younger sister. I had met her several times while we were dating. We were never close, but we had always been polite. That made it strange when Jessica and I were sitting at a cafe one Saturday morning, and Jessica suddenly looked toward the window. "Don't turn around fast," she said. Naturally, I turned around fast. Ryan's sister was standing across the street with her phone in her hand, looking directly at our table. At first, I tried to explain it away. People run into each other. Cities are smaller than they feel. But over the next 2 weeks, I saw her near a grocery store, outside a bookstore I liked, and close to a restaurant where I was meeting friends. Most of those places weren't secret. I had posted from them before the breakup, which made it less impressive and much more unsettling. Jessica finally said what I had been avoiding. "Claire, this is stalking." I shook my head because the word felt too serious. It's weird. Weird is one accidental run-in. This is not weird. She was right. I wasn't afraid exactly. Ryan had always been more dramatic than dangerous. But I was tired in a way I couldn't explain. The relationship had ended weeks earlier, and somehow he was still forcing himself into my daily life. Then he crossed into my family. My sister called one night with a tightness in her voice I recognized immediately. "Ryan contacted someone at my office." I sat up. "He did what?" "Not directly. A mutual acquaintance reached out and warned people that you're manipulative and emotionally abusive." That made me angrier than anything he had done to me. My sister's workplace had nothing to do with our breakup. My family had nothing to do with his posts. Fortunately, her coworkers ignored it, especially after the screenshots had already made his credibility shaky. But the fact that he tried was enough. A few days later, my father left Ryan a voicemail. My father is calm in a way that can be more intimidating than shouting. He doesn't rant, he doesn't threaten, he just says things so plainly that you feel embarrassed for needing to hear them. I never heard the voicemail, and he never repeated it to me, but the messages targeting my sister stopped within a day. When I asked what he said, he only smiled and said, I reminded him that actions have consequences. For a little while, things quieted down. Then Ryan's mother called again. The second call from Ryan's mother came while I was making dinner. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. This time she didn't sound angry. She sounded worn out. "Claire, can we talk?" "We are talking." "You know what I mean." She spent the next few minutes explaining how hard things had become for Ryan. His friendships were strained. People were questioning him. Relatives were asking uncomfortable questions. Former supporters had disappeared. As she spoke, I noticed she kept describing what Ryan was suffering through without ever naming what he had done to cause it. Finally, she said, "Ryan wants to move forward." I looked at the pasta boiling on my stove and nearly laughed. This man had created burner accounts, sent payment requests, dragged my sister's workplace into it, and let his own sister follow me around town. Now he wanted peace. "That's great," I said. "You don't sound convinced." "I'm not," she sighed. "What would it take for this to end?" That was the question she had really called to ask. I set the spoon down and leaned against the counter. What exactly do you think I'm doing? What do you mean? I mean specifically, what action are you asking me to stop? For once, she didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, the screenshots. They've been up for weeks. Yes, but they're still there. That was when I understood the disconnect. Ryan's family believed the screenshots were the problem. They didn't want him to repair anything. They wanted the evidence to disappear so everyone could pretend the damage had no source. He lied about me. I know. He admitted it privately and still kept going. There was a long pause on the other end. I know, she said quietly. Then why are we talking about screenshots instead of that? She had no answer. The call ended without a deal, apology, or promise. Oddly, I felt lighter afterward. Ryan's mother couldn't fix this. His sister couldn't fix it. Emily couldn't fix it. I couldn't fix it either. The only person who could stop the situation was Ryan, and he kept choosing not to. Over the next few weeks, the collapse started happening without me. People in Ryan's friend group began comparing stories. He had told one person I was obsessed with him after the breakup. He had told another he was traumatized. He told someone else the screenshots were fake, but also somehow out of context. The details shifted depending on who was listening, and eventually even people who wanted to support him got tired of trying to keep the versions straight. Jessica called me one afternoon after coffee with a mutual acquaintance. Ryan's friends are fighting, she said. About what? About whether he's lying or whether he's just completely lost the plot. I didn't celebrate it. Part of me felt relieved, but another part felt embarrassed. That I had ever loved someone who could turn a breakup into this. That was the hardest thing to admit. Not that Ryan fooled other people. That he had fooled me for a while, too. A few days later, a woman who had followed the situation reached out to me. At first, I assumed she was another stranger with an opinion. Instead, she told me she had joined an online support group Ryan helped moderate. He keeps retelling the breakup, she wrote. It doesn't feel like healing. It feels like he's stuck. I read that message more than once. It was probably the clearest description of Ryan anyone had given me. He wasn't rebuilding his life. He was living inside a version of our breakup where he could still be the wounded hero if he found the right audience. By summer, I stopped checking his profiles. I stopped asking mutual friends for updates. Entire days passed without me thinking about him, and those days felt like getting pieces of myself back. Emily called again after running into several former members of Ryan's friend group at a birthday gathering. Old stories had started resurfacing. Friends compared notes about small lies, shifting blame, and the way Ryan always seemed to become the victim whenever a relationship or friendship ended badly. He didn't just do it to you, Emily said. That should have made me feel better. In a way it did, but it also made me sad. I had spent weeks wondering what I missed, what I ignored, how I failed to see him clearly. Learning that the pattern existed before me didn't erase the damage, but it helped me stop treating it like a personal failure. A few weeks later, Jessica told me Ryan had tried starting a relationship advice page. I almost choked on my drink. A what? A relationship advice page, she said, already laughing. Quotes, healing content, personal growth lessons, the whole thing. It didn't last long. People recognized him. Comments about the screenshots started appearing, and the page disappeared. For the first time in months, I felt something close to pity. Ryan kept treating every consequence like an image problem. He never seemed to understand that people weren't upset because he had been criticized online. They were upset because they no longer trusted him. I'd actually met Ethan months earlier through mutual friends, but we hadn't really talked much until everything with Ryan started falling apart. As our paths kept crossing, we started talking more often. We weren't officially dating at first. We simply kept ending up at the same dinners, the same group outings, and eventually the same conversations. It wasn't dramatic or fast. Before our first date, I awkwardly said, I should probably explain the internet drama. He smiled a little. I already know. I groaned. How bad is it? Honestly, it sounds exhausting. That answer made me like him more than any grand reassurance could have. He didn't treat my life like gossip. He treated it like something strange and tiring that had happened before he arrived. With Ethan, the Ryan situation became exactly what I needed it to become. Background noise. Work got better. I got promoted. My family settled back into normal routines. Jessica stopped watching Ryan's chaos like a sport. Life kept moving, and eventually, Ryan became someone I mentioned only when the story came up. Nearly 6 months after it started, I met Emily for coffee. She was no longer close to Ryan, and there was something sad about that, even after everything. At one point, she stirred her drink and said, He's still telling the story. I laughed softly. Of course he is. Just to a smaller audience now. That stayed with me. For months, I kept imagining what I would say if Ryan ever apologized. Sitting across from Emily, I finally realized I didn't need that conversation anymore. When Emily and I left the cafe, we stood outside for a moment before going our separate ways. The afternoon was warm, ordinary, almost too normal for a story that had once felt like it would never end. As I walked back to my car, I caught myself smiling. Ryan had never apologized, and I knew some people would probably always believe his version of events. A few weeks later, Ryan sent one final message. "You really think you're innocent in all this?" I stared at the message for a moment. A few months earlier, I probably would have typed out a response and spent an hour arguing with him. Instead, I deleted the conversation. Ethan was waiting outside. "Ready?" he asked. I slipped the phone into my pocket. "Yeah." As we walked away, I realized Ryan was probably still telling the same story somewhere. For the first time, I wasn't part of the story he was telling anymore.